The day Emmeline Prescott stopped believing in love, it rained. Not a gentle, cleansing rain, the kind that poets wrote sonnets about. No, this was a relentless, pounding downpour that turned the streets of Mayfair into rivers of mud and seeped through the leaded glass of the drawing-room windows until the panes wept. Emmeline stood at the edge of the ballroom, her hands clasped so tightly before her that her knuckles had gone white. She was 17 years old, and she had just watched Lord William Ashworth, the man who had vowed not 3 months past to love her until the stars themselves burned out, propose marriage to Lady Cecily Thornton. He had not even looked at her. Not once. "My dear," her mother murmured, her grip like iron around Emmeline's elbow. "You will not make a scene." "I wasn't going to make a scene," Emmeline whispered. She was not certain this was true. There was something building in her chest, hot and terrible, and she thought it might be either tears or screams, and she was not sure which was worse. "You will smile," her mother continued, as if Emmeline had not spoken. "You will congratulate them. And tomorrow, we will begin again. Begin again." As if love were a game of cards, and she had merely played a poor hand. As if her heart were not currently being fed through a shredding machine somewhere in the vicinity of her ribs. Lord Ashworth slid the ring onto Lady Cecily's finger. A sapphire. Emmeline had always preferred sapphires. She had told him so, once, on a golden afternoon in Hyde Park, when he had held her hand beneath his coat and promised her the world. "I shall buy you all the sapphires in England," he had said. She had believed him. Now, watching Lady Cecily tilt her hand so the candlelight caught the stone, Emmeline felt something inside her shift and settle into place. Something cold. Something final. She had given him everything, her trust, her heart, her dreams of a future. And he had taken it all and traded it for a larger dowry and a more impressive family name. "I shall never do it again," she said quietly. Her mother did not hear her. Or if she did not understand. But Emmeline meant it. Every word. She vowed, there in the dripping wet ballroom, to never again be foolish enough to love. To never again hand her heart to someone who might drop it. To never again believe pretty words and golden promises. She would marry, of course. She was a practical girl, and she understood her duty. But she would marry sensibly, to a man who would not inspire poetry or passion. A man who would be kind enough, distant enough, safe. Love was a fairy tale. And Emmeline Prescott was done with fairy tales. 11 years later, Emmeline, now Lady Ashworth, a bitter twist of fate she had learned to endure, sat in the morning room of her country estate and watched a man walk up her drive. She did not know him. This was, in itself, unusual. Emmeline knew everyone in a 20-mile radius. She knew which farmers cheated on their weights and which vicars drank too much sherry. She knew the names of every servant's children and which wildflowers bloomed in which hedgerows. She had spent 11 years constructing a quiet, orderly life, and she had constructed it very thoroughly indeed. This man did not belong in her orderly life. He was tall. This was the first thing she noticed, because there was rather a lot of him to notice. Even from this distance, she could see that he moved with the easy confidence of a man who had never once doubted his welcome anywhere. His coat was well cut, his boots were polished, and his hair was the color of autumn leaves just before they turned. He was also soaked to the skin. Emmeline set down her embroidery. "Mrs. Higgins," she called toward the corridor. Her housekeeper appeared with admirable promptness. "My lady, there is a gentleman approaching the house. He appears to be wet." Mrs. Higgins peered through the window. "So he does." She paused. "And rather handsome, if you don't mind my saying." "I do mind, actually," Emmeline said, but without any real heat. Mrs. Higgins had been with her for 8 years and was less a servant than an institution. "Have Mrs. Potter prepare a tray. And light a fire in the blue drawing room. You'll receive him, then?" Emmeline considered this. A sensible woman would send him away. A sensible woman would not invite strange, handsome, soaking wet men into her home. But it was raining again, and Emmeline had never been able to turn away a wet creature. It was why her stables housed 3 elderly, retired carriage horses and her kitchens were overrun with barn cats. "I'll receive him," she said. Briefly. His name, it turned out, was Mr. Sebastian Devere. He introduced himself with a bow that somehow managed to be both respectful and irreverent, water dripping from his hair onto her good Axminster carpet. "I apologize for the state of me," he said, straightening. "My carriage threw a wheel 2 miles south of here, and your house was the first I encountered." "You walked 2 miles in this weather?" Emmeline asked. "I ran, mostly. Though I'm afraid the distinction has been lost somewhere in the vicinity of my soaked smallclothes." Emmeline blinked. She was not accustomed to gentlemen mentioning their smallclothes within 5 minutes of an introduction. "You must be chilled through," she said, because it was what one said in such situations. "I've ordered a fire." "You are too kind. I am practical. I've also sent for dry clothing. My late husband's things have been packed away, but I believe there may be something that will serve." Something flickered across his face at the mention of her husband. Not pity, precisely, she was well accustomed to pity, but something else. Something that looked almost like recognition. "You are Lady Ashworth," he said. It was not a question. "I am Lord Ashworth's widow. I have been, these past 5 years." He nodded slowly. His eyes, they were grey, she realized, the color of storm clouds, moved over her face with an intensity that made her want to look away. She did not look away. "I knew your husband," he said. Slightly. Emmeline felt her expression settle into the careful blankness she had perfected over the years. "Indeed. We were at Oxford together. Different years, but we moved in similar circles." "I see." There was a pause. Mr. Devere's gaze remained fixed on her face, and Emmeline had the uncomfortable sensation that he was seeing rather more than she wished to show. "It was a great loss," he said quietly. "His passing." "It was," Emmeline agreed. 11 years ago, she had vowed never again to give anyone the power to hurt her. Loving William Ashworth had nearly destroyed her. Marrying him, yes, she had married him, in the end, 3 years after that terrible night in the ballroom, had been its own kind of destruction. But she had learned. She had grown armor, thick and impenetrable. And when William had died, thrown from his horse on a hunting party, she had mourned him as a widow ought and then continued on exactly as she had before. She felt nothing now. She had made certain of it. "I won't keep you long," Mr. Devere said, as if he could hear the direction of her thoughts. "As soon as my carriage is repaired, I'll be on my way." "Where were you headed?" "My brother's estate. Hes in Cornwall." "Cornwall is quite a distance." "Yes." His lips curved into something that was almost a smile. In beginning to regret not waiting for better weather, Emmeline found herself fighting a responding smile. She was not sure why. There was nothing particularly amusing about his predicament. "You'll stay the night, at least," she heard herself say. "It will be dark within the hour, and the roads will be treacherous." "I couldn't impose." "It's not an imposition. I have a dozen guest rooms, and Mrs. Potter will be desolate if she's gone to the trouble of making cakes and no one is there to eat them." Mr. Devere regarded her for a long moment. "You are not what I expected, Lady Ashworth." "What did you expect?" "Someone colder," he said frankly. "The neighborhood reports you are quite formidable." Emmeline inclined her head. "I am formidable. But I am not inhospitable. There is a difference. I shall endeavor to remember it." He smiled then, properly, and Emmeline felt something shift in her chest. Something she had not felt in 11 years. Something dangerously close to interest. She crushed it immediately. Sebastian Devere was not, as a rule, a man given to impulsivity. He was the second son of a viscount, which meant he had spent his entire life learning to be practical. His brother would inherit the title, the estate, the responsibility. Sebastian had inherited an education and the understanding that he would need to make his own way in the world. He had made it. He had traveled, invested wisely, built a comfortable fortune. He had a townhouse in London and a small estate in Kent and a reputation for level-headedness that he rather prided himself upon, which made his current behavior all the more inexplicable. He had not, strictly speaking, needed to call at Ashworth Manor. The carriage could have been repaired without his supervision. There was an inn not half a mile from where the carriage had broken down. He could have waited there, warm and dry, drinking mediocre ale and reading yesterday's newspaper. Instead, he had walked 2 miles in a rainstorm to present himself at the door of a woman he had spent the past 5 years wondering about. He had never met Emmeline Ashworth. He had, however, met her husband. And he had never quite forgotten the way William Ashworth had spoken of his wife. Cold, William had called her, on the rare occasions he mentioned her at all. Distant. A dutiful wife, but... He had never finished that sentence. But Sebastian had seen the way William looked at other women, the way his gaze lingered where it ought not. He had drawn his own conclusions. He had also, on one memorable evening, watched William lose a small fortune at cards and then complain that his wife was too frugal with his allowance. Sebastian had not liked William Ashworth very much. He had not expected to like his widow, either. He had expected, perhaps, to find a woman as cold and distant as her husband had described. A woman who had married for title and comfort and felt no particular grief at her husband's passing. Instead, he had found a woman who fed cakes to house guests and kept 3 retired carriage horses in her stables. A woman who looked at him with wary grey eyes and tried very hard not to smile. A woman who was, he was rapidly discovering, absolutely nothing like her husband had described. "You're staring," Lady Ashworth said. Sebastian realized he was, in fact, staring. He was standing by the fire in the blue drawing room, wearing the late Lord Ashworth's clothing, a coat that fit passably well and breeches that were a trifle too short, and staring at his hostess as if she were a particularly intriguing puzzle. "My apologies," he said. "I was wool gathering. It must have been fascinating wool." "It was. I was wool gathering about you." Her eyebrows rose. They were nice eyebrows, Sebastian noted. Elegant arches that gave her face an expression of perpetual skepticism. "That is either very forward or very honest," she said. "I haven't decided which. I am often too honest." "It's a failing." "Is it?" "My mother certainly thinks so." He smiled, hoping to coax a similar response from her. "She says I would have made a terrible diplomat." Lady Ashworth did not smile, but her lips twitched. Sebastian counted it as a victory. "You knew my husband at Oxford," she said. It was not a question. "I did." "What did you think of him?" It was a direct question, delivered without preamble. Sebastian respected directness. "I thought he was fortunate," he said carefully, "to have won such a wife." Something flickered across her face. Surprise, perhaps. Or pain, quickly suppressed. "You are diplomatic after all," she said. "I am honest. I told you, it's a failing." She looked at him for a long moment. The fire crackled between them, casting shadows across her face. "My husband and I," she said slowly, "had an arrangement. It was not a love match." "I gathered." "Did you?" Her voice was carefully neutral. "From what he said. From what he didn't say." Sebastian paused. "And from what I observed." Lady Ashworth was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "He was not a cruel man. I want to be clear about that. He was simply not suited to marriage. And I was not suited to him." "What are you suited to?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. She blinked, and for just a moment, Sebastian saw something vulnerable beneath the composed exterior. "I am suited," she said, "to solitude. To quiet. To a life without expectations I cannot meet. Or expectations that others have failed to meet." Her gaze sharpened. "That is rather perceptive for a man I met 2 hours ago. I have been told I notice things." He paused. "I notice, for instance, that you are very careful. You move carefully, you speak carefully, you arrange your features carefully. As if you are afraid of being caught off guard." "Everyone is careful," she said. "It is called manners." "No. Manners are what you do with your teacup and your dinner fork. What you do with your face, that's something else entirely." Lady Ashworth set down her teacup. Her face, Sebastian noted, had become very still. "I think," she said, "that you should drink your tea before it gets cold." It was a dismissal. Sebastian recognized it as such, and he respected her enough to accept it. But as he raised his cup to his lips, he made a quiet vow of his own that he would learn what had made Emmeline Ashworth so careful. And perhaps, if she would allow, He would show her that not everyone was worth guarding against. Emmeline did not sleep well that night. This was unusual. She was a woman of regular habits, and sleep was one of them. She retired at 11, rose at 7, and slept through the night without interruption. Her life was orderly and predictable, and she liked it that way. But tonight, every time she closed her eyes, she saw grey eyes and autumn leaf hair and a smile that seemed to see straight through her defenses. "You are very careful," he had said. "As if you are afraid of being caught off guard." She was afraid. She had spent 11 years being afraid, not of love, precisely, but of herself. Of the part of her that still, despite everything, wanted to believe in fairy tales. She had believed once. She had been 17 and foolish and certain that William Ashworth's love was the most real thing in the world. And then she had watched him give that love to someone else, as easily as handing over a coat, and she had learned that fairy tales were lies. She had married him anyway, 3 years later. Lady Cecily had died of consumption, and William had come back to Emmeline with pretty words and sad eyes and promises that this time would be different. She had wanted to believe him. She had wanted it so desperately that she had ignored every instinct screaming at her to run. And it had been fine. Their marriage had been fine. William had been attentive enough, faithful enough, kind enough. But he had never loved her, not the way she had once loved him. And she had never let herself love him again. She had locked that part of herself away, and she had thrown away the key. Now, a man with storm-cloud eyes had walked into her drawing room and suggested, very gently, that perhaps she did not need to be so careful. It was absurd. He was a stranger. He would leave tomorrow, and she would never see him again, and her life would return to its quiet, orderly rhythms. She should be relieved. She was not relieved. The next morning, Emmeline came downstairs to find Mr. Devere in her garden. He was standing among her roses, the late-blooming varieties that were still putting forth flowers despite the autumn chill, with his head tilted back and his eyes closed. His borrowed coat had been discarded, and his sleeves were rolled to the elbow, revealing forearms that were, Emmeline noticed with distant interest, rather nicely formed. He looked, she thought, like a man who had forgotten he was supposed to be somewhere else. "Mr. Devere," she said. He opened his eyes and turned to face her. "Lady Ashworth. I hope you don't mind. Your housekeeper said I might take some air." "I don't mind." She hesitated, then stepped through the garden door. "Do you often inspect roses with your eyes closed?" "Only when I'm trying to remember something." He smiled, that crooked, disarming smile that she was beginning to recognize. "My mother had roses like these. She used to say that if you closed your eyes, you could almost hear them growing." Emmeline looked at the roses. "Can you?" "Not today. Perhaps I'm out of practice." He paused. "Would you like to try?" She should say no. She should excuse herself and return to the house and her embroidery and her orderly, predictable life. Instead, she closed her eyes. The garden settled around her. She heard birdsong, the distant clatter of the kitchens, the whisper of wind through the rose canes. And beneath it all, something else, something almost too quiet to hear. Growing. Living. Becoming. She opened her eyes. Mr. Devere was watching her, his expression soft. "Well?" he asked. "I think," she said slowly, "that I heard something." "What?" "Patience." She looked at the roses. "They are very patient." He was quiet for a moment. "That is a lovely thing to say." "It's not lovely. It's true. Those are not mutually exclusive." Emmeline felt her cheeks warm. She was not accustomed to being called lovely, not truly, not by someone who seemed to mean it. Compliments from William had always felt like currency, exchanged for something she was expected to provide. This felt different. "Your carriage," she said, changing the subject. "Has it been repaired?" "Not yet. The wheel was beyond saving. Thief had to send for a new one." "That will take time." "Yes." He did not sound particularly distressed by this. "Several days, at least." "Several days." Emmeline's heart did a strange, fluttery thing that she immediately suppressed. "You are welcome to stay," she said. "As long as necessary. You are too kind. I am practical." It would be foolish to send you to the inn when I have empty rooms. Ah, yes, he said, his eyes dancing. Practicality. I forgot. Emmeline pressed her lips together to contain a smile. You are laughing at me. I would never. You absolutely would. Perhaps a little. His smile softened. But only because you are so determined to call kindness practicality, and I find it rather endearing. Endearing. No one had ever called her endearing. You are a very strange man, Mr. Devere, she said. I prefer unconventional. I prefer strange. He laughed, a real laugh, warm and unguarded, and Emmeline felt that dangerous, fluttering thing in her chest again. She was in trouble. The days passed. Sebastian's carriage took an improbably long time to arrive. First, the wrong size was sent. Then the correct size was sent but delayed by weather. Then the wheelwright fell ill, and there was no one to fit it. Emmeline suspected, but did not say, that Sebastian might have had something to do with these delays. She did not ask. She did not want to know. Instead, she found herself falling into a rhythm with him. Mornings in the garden, afternoons in the library, evenings by the fire. They talked about everything and nothing, books and music and politics, his travels abroad, her work with the local poor. He told her about his brother, who was expecting his first child, and his mother, who still wrote him letters filled with maternal advice he mostly ignored. In return, Emmeline found herself telling him things she had never told anyone. About her childhood, her parents, the loneliness of being an only child. About the year after William's death, when she had learned to manage the estate on her own and discovered that she was far more capable than anyone had ever told her. She did not tell him about the night in the ballroom. She did not tell him about the vow she had made, standing in the rain, watching her heart walk away on another woman's arm. But sometimes, when he looked at her with those storm-cloud eyes, she thought he knew anyway. On the fourth evening, they walked in the garden after dinner. The rain had finally stopped, and the air was crisp and clean, smelling of damp earth and fading roses. You never married, Emmeline said. It was not a question. No. Why not? He was quiet for a moment. I suppose I never met anyone who made me want to. And now? He stopped walking. The moonlight caught his face, softening the sharp planes and hollows, and Emmeline realized that her heart was beating very fast. Now, he said slowly, I find myself reconsidering. She should step away. She should laugh, make a joke, change the subject. She should do anything except stand here, frozen, watching him move closer. Emmeline. Her name on his lips was soft, careful. A question. May I? She should say no. Yes, she whispered. He kissed her. It was gentle, at first, a brush of lips, a question waiting for answer. And then her answer came, because she could not help herself. She had been alone for so long and he was so warm and she had forgotten what it felt like to be held. She kissed him back. His hands came up to frame her face, his thumbs tracing the line of her cheekbones. He kissed her like she was precious, like she was fragile, like he was afraid she might shatter. And Emmeline, who had not cried since the night she stopped believing in love, felt tears prick at her eyes. She pulled back. I can't. Emmeline. I can't do this. Her voice shook. I made a vow. I promised myself. What did you promise? She looked at him, this man who had walked into her life uninvited and proceeded to dismantle every wall she had built. This man who looked at her like she was something rare and precious, like her heart was worth protecting instead of breaking. I promised, she said, that I would never love again. Sebastian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was very gentle. That is not a vow, he said. That is a wound. Emmeline closed her eyes. The tears spilled over, trailing down her cheeks. He promised me everything, she whispered. And then he gave it all to someone else. I watched him put a sapphire ring on her finger, and I thought I would die. Not from a broken heart. From embarrassment. From the sheer humiliation of having been so foolish. You were not foolish. You were young, and you trusted someone who did not deserve your trust. I should have known better. Why? Because you loved him? Sebastian shook his head. Love is not foolish, Emmeline. It is the bravest thing we do. She looked at him. Is it? Yes. Because it requires us to be vulnerable. To risk being hurt. To offer someone our heart and hope they don't drop it. He paused. I would never drop yours. The tears were flowing freely now. Emmeline made no effort to stop them. I don't know how, she said. I don't know how to love again. I locked that part of myself away so long ago, I don't even remember where I put the key. Sebastian took her hand. His fingers were warm, steady. Then we shall find it together, he said. However long it takes. He stayed. The carriage wheel arrived, was fitted, and declared functional. Sebastian sent his driver ahead to Cornwall with a letter for his brother, explaining that he had been delayed by matters of the utmost importance. He did not specify what those matters were, but Emmeline suspected his brother might guess. They did not speak again of love, or vows, or locked-away hearts. Instead, they continued as they had before, walking in the garden, reading in the library, talking late into the night. But something had shifted between them, a new awareness that thrummed beneath every word and glance. Emmeline found herself watching him. The way his hair curled at his collar, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the way he always looked at her as if she were the only person in the room. She found herself wanting things she had sworn never to want again. One evening, a week after the kiss in the garden, Sebastian found her in the library. She was sitting by the fire, an unopened book in her lap, staring at nothing. May I join you? He asked. She nodded. He sat in the chair across from her, close enough to touch but not quite touching. The fire crackled between them. I've been thinking, he said, about what you told me. About your vow. Emmeline said nothing. And I've been thinking about what I said. That love is brave. He paused. I believe that. But I also believe that what you did, building walls, protecting yourself, that was brave, too. You survived something terrible, and you rebuilt your life. That takes courage. It doesn't feel like courage, she said. It feels like hiding. Perhaps it was. But you don't have to hide anymore. He leaned forward, his eyes holding hers. I'm not William Ashworth, Emmeline. I won't make you promises I can't keep. I won't tell you the stars will burn out before I stop loving you, because I don't know that. I don't know anything about the future, except that I want you in it. Her breath caught. Sebastian. I love you. His voice was steady, certain. I don't expect you to say it back. I don't expect anything from you except what you're willing to give. But I wanted you to know. The fire crackled. Emmeline's heart hammered against her ribs. You hardly know me, she whispered. I know that you keep retired carriage horses and feed cakes to strangers. I know that you close your eyes to listen to roses grow. I know that you are kind and brave and far too generous with your forgiveness. He smiled. I know that I want to spend the rest of my life learning everything else. Emmeline looked at him. At his storm cloud eyes and autumn leaf hair, at the patient curve of his mouth and the steady certainty of his hands. She thought of the girl she had been, 17 and foolish, believing in fairy tales. She thought of the woman she had become, careful and guarded, afraid to want anything too much. And she thought of what Sebastian had said, that first day in the garden. Patience. They are very patient. She had spent 11 years waiting. Waiting for her heart to heal, waiting for her fear to fade, waiting for someone who would not break her. Perhaps it was time to stop waiting. I don't know how to do this, she said. I don't know how to be vulnerable again. I don't know how to trust. Then we learn together. He took her hand. Slowly. Patiently. However long it takes. I'm afraid. I know. His thumb traced circles on her palm. So am I. She looked up at him. You are. Terrified. He smiled, crooked and real. You could break my heart, Emmeline. You have that power. I'm giving it to you freely, because I trust you. And because you are worth the risk. Something shifted inside her. Something warm and golden, like sunlight breaking through clouds. I don't want to break your heart, she said. What do you want? She took a breath. Another. And then she said the words she had sworn 11 years ago never to say again. I want to try. His smile, oh, his smile. It was like watching the sun rise. Then we shall try, he said. Together, the rose garden was in full bloom. Emmeline stood at the edge of the path, watching her husband of 3 months examine a particularly stubborn bud. He had his head tilted, his eyes half closed, and his sleeves rolled to the elbow in that way she had come to adore. Well, she called. Can you hear anything? Sebastian opened his eyes. Patience, he said. They are very patient. She laughed, and the sound surprised her. She had not laughed much, before him. She had not known how. He crossed the garden to stand beside her, slipping his arm around her waist with easy familiarity. 3 months of marriage, and she still felt a flutter in her chest every time he touched her. I received a letter from your brother, she said. Cecily has decided she will be born in August, and she refuses to wait a moment longer. Cecily? Sebastian raised an eyebrow. They are certain it's a girl? They are certain she's stubborn. Emmeline leaned into him. Apparently she takes after her mother. I cannot imagine where she gets it. He pressed a kiss to her temple. You are not stubborn. You are determined. There is a difference. I am formidable. There is a difference. There is. His arm tightened around her. You are the most formidable woman I have ever met. And I love you. She turned to face him, rising on her toes to press her lips to his. The kiss was soft, familiar, full of promise. I love you, too, she whispered. I did not think I would ever say that again. I did not think I would ever feel it again. And now. She looked at her garden, her roses, her husband. She thought of the girl she had been, standing in a ballroom, watching her heart break. She thought of the woman she had become, careful and guarded, certain she would never love again. And she thought of the man who had walked through the rain and refused to leave. Now, she said, I believe in fairy tales. Sebastian smiled. So do I. And in the garden, surrounded by roses and sunlight and the patient promise of tomorrow, Emmeline Prescott, Emmeline Devere, now, she was still learning to love the sound of it, let herself believe. The end. Do you love epic, emotional romance stories with guaranteed happy endings? Subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a new story. Thank you for watching. Bye until next time. Moral of the story. Love is not the absence of fear, it is the courage to risk your heart anyway. Walls may keep out pain, but they also keep out joy. True strength is not in never being wounded, but in trusting again after you have been.